All right, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to have this opportunity to connect this evening, to see each other, to hear each other. And of course, we are all very much looking forward that when we will actually reconnect in person this September with the opening of school. Thank God the situation is such that, and the improvements that we have seen is that will be able to, and that we are planning to be able to open the school in person starting this September. It's certainly been too long that things have been remote, because the idea is not to be remote. The idea is, of course, to be close and in contact. It's always been at Chabad, the governing principle and the guiding principle has always been the safety, the health, and the welfare of the children. This is what informs every single decision that we make, every single policy, every single protocol. And this September, we will be opening. Obviously, the situation will be more challenging and will be different than it has been in normal years. But we have, through the diligent efforts of Mara Pearl and our staff, and based upon the guidance of the medical community, of the CDC, New York City Department of Health, we are prepared to set in motion the necessary policies and protocols and systems which will guarantee in-person school in a way which is safe and which is healthy for our children, for our staff, for our entire community. Obviously, some sacrifices will have to be made, but it is well worth the effort, because there is nothing which can compare to having the children together with their morot in their classroom, learning and growing and thriving and blossoming. And that's what we do. This is what motivates us. So I will turn the conversation over to Mara Pearl, who will go step by step, articulating what the procedures will be, at least what we anticipate they will be in the beginning of the school year. After Mara Pearl goes through all the slides, we'll have a chance for Q&A, for questions, which either you can wait or you can type them in, and hopefully we will get to everyone's questions over the course of the evening. Mara Pearl.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to see all of you. So as Rabbi Yossi said, we are following the guidelines of the CDC and the New York City Department of Health. And of course, we don't have anything set in stone yet. We're just sharing with you the information that we have up until now. I've spoken to many directors of preschools as well as principals of elementary schools, and based on the different ideas that we bounced around and the regulations that are up to date as of this week, it does seem that we can do this. We have the facilities and the capabilities and the staff to be able to open up in September based on the regulations as they are today. It's really just going through every single regulation, seeing how workable it is and making it happen. And we are extremely motivated to do that. We have been on Zooming your children for the past few weeks, and every teacher is just desperate to get back into the classroom. Preschool is all about hands-on and connecting to children in a face-to-face, daily way, and giving children sensory and real-life experiences. So we are so motivated to be back in the classroom in September. The slides I'm going to show you are based on the Department of Health and CDC regulations. I compiled them together. I brought out the points that were most relevant to a preschool, because some of them were regulations for day camps. And let me share them with you, and then please feel free to ask questions afterwards. Sherni, you may begin. Okay, opening in the fall, slide 2. Okay, the first regulation is, of course, physical distancing. And only staff and students will be allowed in the school building at any time. We will not have any extra, we will not begin the school year with extra special educators or with yoga, with amazing athletes, or all the other very special and needed figures that we have in our school, but they will not be beginning in the school year until we get further clearance for them. It's only going to be staff and students. Drop-off and pickup will take place at the main gate, again, so that there aren't parents in the hallways. And this will make, this will maintain the amount of contact that children have with other adults besides their teachers. Each class will be its own pod. That's the word that they're using now, meaning that each class is its own little bubble and really doesn't have interactions with any of the other classrooms, so that if there is a breakout in a specific class, we will not have to close the entire school. It will only affect that class. This includes a separate bathroom designated for every class, staggered playground time, so each class plays on their own in the playground. We will not be having assemblies or combining classes for any reason. So no Rabbi Chaim in the hallways like we always had, and no classes visiting each other. Each class will literally be either in their classroom or in the playground. And the last most important thing is we can group children with 10 in each class if required. That's the number that they're regulating right now for day camps. If we do have to shrink the classes down to 10, we do have the availability this year to have classes of 10 with 2 teachers in every single classroom. Go ahead, Shani. Okay, personal protective equipment and screening. So as of today, these are the regulations again, as of today, and this may change in September. As of today, counselors in the day camps are required to wear masks, and this might be a requirement for us as well in September. So staff might be required to wear masks and are ready to do so. Temperature will be taken by a touchless thermometer when the children arrive in school. The teachers or whoever it is, probably me or Shnerny, who will be standing by the front door, will also scan each child to see how the child looks. If the child looks okay and it doesn't have a runny nose or a cold, before they're allowed to come into the classroom. The staff will be tested for COVID before the first day of school as well, if the State Department, of course, requires that. Hygiene. We will continue to provide lunches and snacks. However, instead of having hot lunches, which get portioned out to every classroom, we're going to have pre-packed lunches. Maybe we'll be able to get hot lunches in individualized portions. We'll be working on that, but the goal is that there won't be a center platter in the center of every table, and there'll be a minimal amount of time that teachers will be spending in the kitchen getting lunches for their classroom. Hand washing, and snacks as well. We'll get individualized snack packets. Rice cakes come in small packets, sliced apples, carrots. We'll explore and see what's out there. Hand washing consistently throughout the day, of course, which is something that we have always been vigilant about, but now, of course, it'll be on another level, including upon arriving to school, both staff and children, staff before and after changing a child, and before and after handling food, and of course, before and after playing in the playground. Okay, cleaning and disinfecting. So there are frequently, we will have 2 designated cleaners in our school throughout the day, who will be going around and wiping down surfaces that are touched frequently, such as tables, sinks, doors, windowsills, areas where children are, touched frequently. Also, the playground will be cleaned between each class. Daily cleaning also will include any toys and all surfaces with approved child-safe products. So because children do put things in their mouth, and the cleaning supplies that we use throughout the day are going to have to be our standard child-approved cleaning supplies. However, on the weekends, we'll be able to do a deeper cleaning with industrial cleaners when children are not in the school. Also, another change that will probably have to happen is toys that cannot be sanitized, stuffed animal, dress up, things made out of fabric, will have to be put aside and not used until we're given permission to do so again. Okay, and the last slide, communication. So firstly, as this is all new for all of us, we will have staff training before school begins for our entire staff, both in recognizing signs and symptoms of COVID, as well as hygiene and keeping their classrooms clean, and alerting the administration when things are not the way it should be. So this is all something that every single person is going to be aware of. I see a question, is pick up and drop off staggered? So thank you for that question. I read that in the protocols from the CDC. So right now we already have staggered pickup because we have drop off from 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9, and 9:30. So we never have the whole school coming at once, but we will see if there are too many children coming at a time, then maybe we'll stagger it even more. But right now we have 4 different times that children are coming into the building, and we also have staggered dismissal. We have dismissal at 12:30, 1:30, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I am not assuming that there's going to be a rush of traffic either coming or going. Thank you for that question. Number 2, signage for hand washing and social distancing will be posted throughout the building. These are all regulations that we're going to, I'm sure, have to follow through with. Immediate communication with families if a child or staff member becomes infected, including class and name of infected person. So this is something that's going to change. Last year, we were very protective of people's privacy when there was initially when COVID began, and we did not share the name of the person in the class. However, that is going to change, and we are going to share that with all new families as well, that if it's a child or a staff member that has COVID, then everyone around has to know who it is and which class that person was in, so that we know who is affected. Number 4, immediate isolation of any person who displayed COVID-like symptoms during the school day. And the isolation room will be in my office, as it has been until now for any child who is sick, and I will be remaining with the child until appropriate guardians or parents pick up the child. Number 5, Department of Health notification regarding any positive COVID results and following their guidelines regarding quarantine, closing, and reopening. So I just want to wrap up by saying that we will be under scrutiny of the Department of Health. I mean, that's the department through which we have our license, and we will be required to follow everything they tell us regarding which classes to close, if the school has to close, and when we will be allowed to reopen. So I am still now in contact with our consultant, and we'll be throughout the year. Question, how will new students, 2-year-olds, deal with adjustments if parents are not allowed into the building? Excellent question. Thank you, Tsiona. So there's a couple of things that we're thinking about, and I'll share them with you. Firstly is we might have one classroom downstairs designated for the youngest class, toddlers, with its own, the yellow class, the red class has its own entrance and to the front of the building, and we might allow parents only in that class for the first week of school to acclimate children. We realize that for the toddlers, this is going to be very challenging, and we have to think of a child's emotional needs and what's developmentally appropriate, and not forget all the strong values that we share regarding children's emotional health. So that is one of the ideas for the toddler class. What if a child needs a bit of emotional support to leave his or her parents in the morning? I don't see the rest of the question. Okay, let me answer the first question. Thank you, Emmanuel, for that question regarding emotional support. Rabbi Yossi, there's a question now. If you can look at it, you'll answer it next.
Okay.
So, Emmanuel, we're going to have to learn to be creative and I'm not sure what the guidelines are going to be. And I'll give you an example. One of the ways in which we get children acclimated to schools, we have home visits, and the teachers go to the child's home to get to know the child. Are we going to be allowed to do that in order to help the child acclimate? I don't know. Will we change and do a park visit where the child sits in the park and gets to play with the teacher? Or if the child comes one at a time to play in the playground with the teacher? Emmanuel, we're going to try to think of different ideas of what we can do to help children. Somebody just asked a question about SEATs. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be allowed regarding special support, any of our physical therapists, speech therapists, and OTs. We're going to have to take the guidelines. Maybe we're going to have to designate one room on the side and have children go one at a time into that room and, clean that room between children. I don't know. I'm sorry, the questions are coming very quickly and I'm not getting a chance to read all of them. So if your question was not answered, please write it again. It just means I can't read and answer at the same time. But with SEATs, again, one of the values of Chabad is we welcome everyone who comes to our school with whatever abilities and challenges they have. And we want to provide the support. What that's going to look like, I'm not sure yet. But every single preschool and elementary school is grappling with all these questions. And I keep calling other directors to find out what other schools are doing and listening to all the possibilities. But remember, we have a very flexible building. We have an upstairs and a downstairs. We have another entrance to another classroom. We can configure the classes based on what works best for us. And we could shrink the classroom size if need be. We're a small school and we can make things work. We can be flexible enough to look at all these different challenges and to make it work. Again, if your question wasn't answered.
Okay, well, I'll pick up, Mara Pearl, on about the second wave.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we've been talking about tonight, the guidelines, the procedures and protocols, is all based upon the current guidance of the CDC, which is, of course, reflective of the current state of the pandemic, the improved situation, but of course, a situation which has not yet disappeared. So, come September, there are three options which could be. It could be relatively the same situation as what we have now, and these would be the guidelines that we start with.
Hold on, Rabbi Yassi, let me just tell everyone that while you're speaking, I'm writing down the questions and we'll answer them. Okay, so keep going.
Okay. It could be relatively the same, the situation could be relatively the same as it is now, and we would be implementing the guidelines that we have discussed tonight. If the situation, God willing, improves and that that there's less concern and whatever other things have occurred to make the situation generally safer, then maybe we will not even need all these protections and extra protections and protocols. The other scenario, of course, is if, God forbid, there is a second wave, if there is a spike, there is definitely under those circumstances, a school would not be allowed to open in person. So what would we do? For the toddler and the pre-nursery classes, we would not start school remotely, meaning that there would be no tuition charged or accrued for any toddler or pre-nursery child until school starts in person. Definitely the pre-K and most probably also the nursery, if we needed to, since these children have already have been here this year for the most part. All the children have been here this year, acclimated to a certain extent to the online learning. So we would start with them, and with the Tamim children, we would start online if necessary. That's a last resort. That would be the only thing which would compel us to do that is if the New York City Department of Health would not allow the physical opening of school. As long as it is legal to open school, we will open school. If it is not, so once again, the toddler and pre-nursery classes would not commence, and there would be no tuition charged for those times. We would anticipate, and we are asking that tuition should be paid in the normal way, each person according to the option which they chose. And if necessary, tuitions would either be credited for future months, or they would be refunded when necessary. But this is what we see the possibility if there is a second wave. I don't think it's...
Mar-Pearl got knocked off, but someone had a question regarding about the shul being open simultaneously with school.
Okay.
And that's
well, during the week, as long as the policy is that no adults are allowed into the building except for staff, then that would apply to the shul also. We would not have the morning weekday minyan during the week until such time as we would allow parents into the building and other adults into the building, all based upon the New York City. So according to these guidelines, we would not have a morning weekday minyan. On the weekends, Shabbat, Sunday, we would have the regular synagogue services. And again, we still have the opportunity then on Sunday to do an industrial strength cleaning of the facility after we've had the general synagogue community there.
Rabbi Yossi, can I ask a question? Because I know you can't see the questions coming in. So number one, some schools have decided to open earlier to make up for the summertime, for the loss of spring semester. So if you can comment on that, would be great too. Can you help us understand the dynamics of the real estate downstairs? Like, which rooms does the school have? Which rooms do they not have? And three, how can you maintain the separateness of the pods in an early drop-off aftercare scenario? And might you consider not having those options?
Okay, all great questions. Right now, we have not entertained starting early, not to say that we're excluding that idea. It's the first time, certainly I'm hearing about it, so it's worthwhile to think about. So we'll definitely take that under consideration. The space that we have downstairs is that we have the entire upstairs. When you come in on the downstairs, as you walk into the door, everything to your right hand, in other words, is part of the Chabad space. Everything to your left hand, has been returned to the landlord. It's not Chabad space. That's in terms of that. I do think that it's an excellent question about early drop-off and late dismissal, and we might find ways, depending upon the enrollment and the staffing, in order to find ways to insulate each group of children, and that has to. But I think that still has to be further fleshed out.
Until Mar-Pearl comes back on, is there anything?
Okay, what are the other? Do you see any other questions we didn't? Okay, continue. Okay, so we talked about early drop-off. So, okay, I see there's a good question here. So, if school starts, in other words, under this scenario, let's say that we do start in September, we have September, October, November, and everyone is starting in person. And let us say that if, God forbid, there is a second wave, January, February, December, we would plan to continue, since the children have already become integrated into the school and familiar with their marot and so forth, we would plan to continue online for them, just as we have done this year. If the second wave comes in October, November, I think that would have to, which is earlier, before the children have truly acclimated and integrated into the process. I think that on a class-by-class basis, there would be a decision and most probably the very youngest classes, we would have to suspend school for them, while those maybe the older, certainly the oldest classes, and we would at least make an effort to try to execute online. So it is a little iffy, a second wave, which would be coming October, November, if that happens. I see there's a question. What the new building? The new building is 3-4 years ahead of us, so God willing, life will be what we remember it by the time the new building is in place. The slides will be shared. I think, Sterny, you will email out to everyone the slides?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
slides
tomorrow
and a
the
recording
slides.
of tonight.
Oh, and a recording also. Okay, so that's great. Are there questions I haven't seen? Predicted start date for this year is the week of right after Labor Day, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's okay, security protocols. Of course, we will have, God willing, we will have Curtis will be back, and of course here, so he will be maintaining the general security. That is actually going to be a higher level of security in the sense that fewer people are going to be making it through the gate, and so arrival will be both with Curtis there providing general security, and either Maraparo, Sterny, or a different administrative person there who will be administering the touchless temperature taking and the health assessment for every child and staff member as they come in.
Okay, I'm sorry, my internet down on all my computers, but I'm back on. Rabbi Yossi, was the question answered regarding, somebody asked if there are separate pods, how are we going to work with children who are in school full time? Was that question answered?
Yes, that question was, okay. Well, it was certainly well asked. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the meantime, I had answered that we would certainly explore attempts of dividing up the both the early drop-off and the late, to divide them up according to their classes, but right. That it's still not, I don't think that we've made a final assessment on how that will work. Right. But we are planning to have the early drop-off and the late pickup.
Right. So one of the ways we were thinking of doing that is by having one teacher per class coming early, so that if they have 1 or 2 children in their class that are part of a drop-off, the child goes straight to their classroom, not to an early drop-off room, and the same for late care, for after pickup. And again, we're going to have to make the decisions as a little bit closer. What other questions here weren't yet addressed? Or should we just, Sterny, do you want to just highlight people who have questions directly?
I think Rabbi Asi covered all the questions in the chat box that I can see. Mm-hmm. If there are any parents that have questions in particular, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, let's go for that.
Or you can raise your hand.
Okay, otherwise we went to the questions, Jenny. Was there anything else?
A mom just asked if there is a second wave and it moved online, would parents have the option to cancel? I don't know if Rabbi Asa, you spoke about that at all?
Well, again, if the second wave comes before or in September, in the beginning of the year, so again, we would not open school for those younger classes, and they wouldn't have to cancel because they would not be there would be no tuition accrued for that. If the second wave, God forbid, was to happen January, February, and such, we would want to continue the school with the on an online way, the way we did it this year. If the second wave was to come in October, November, that really would depend on whether we could effectively and successfully launch an online. I'm going to assume that for the youngest ones, we would have to formally close the school for them, because that would not be possible. As the older classes, we think that we would be able to do it. We would be able to continue online.
I also want to share with everyone that our school is licensed under the New York State Department of Health. We are not under the New York State Department of New York City Department of Health, Department of Education. Being said, we are under the license of Bureau of Daycare, which goes from 0 till age 6. So I know through the talks I've had our Department of Health consultant that the city is really motivated to get daycare centers up and running because people need to go to work. And as you know, a few daycare centers were left up and running for essential workers because they needed a place to drop off their children. So there's already a model in place to have daycare centers up and with these regulations. And we are not going to be under the same phase or wave of schools. We are in a different category. I'm really hoping and believing that because we are really essential for the work, even more so than elementary schools, that we are going to be allowed to be, open and be kept open even more so than elementary schools. So that's one thing in our favor. And the second thing that's in our favor is the size of the school and the ability to maintain smaller classes, have more space if we need to get out those classes. Think of things like having one floor for every 2 classes, so that if a teacher's out, it's only that one person is connected to 2 classes and floating in all the classrooms. Thinking of things like sometimes, having me going into the classrooms if needed, and keeping things really insular and specific just to the teaching staff at our school. So based on things that are already in place and that are working, I really think that this is going to be something that's going to be workable and attainable, and not something that's like over a whole huge school. We really can do this. Somebody just asked a question while I was speaking, and that was, the fact that it's so hard for the teachers and the children to have remote school. Absolutely, and that's how I began. Our goal is not to have remote school at all, anytime. We are going to do the best we can to keep the school. Another thing that I don't know was suggested when I fell off the screen was we really have to have very, very small classes. We can also do two schedules of school, having school from 8 to 12 and then from 5. Just another model of something that we can think of that would work. But the goal is to get hands-on in the classroom with their peers and with their teachers face-to-face. Any other questions? Let's bring this back.
There was one question about space usage downstairs for the outside. I'm assuming the question is if there are people that are using the space, like renting space, Landon, is that what you were referring to?
Oh, okay. What's the question?
Yeah, just if, I just didn't understand. There's space downstairs that's returned back to the landlord, but then is someone else using that space?
No, that space is not used as of now.
Yes, right now the landlord is not using the space. They're not doing anything with it. When and if eventually, if they start refurbishing, the very first thing they will do is they will build a wall which will totally seal off that area. So there's not going to be any traffic, not workers, not construction people. There will be absolutely no traffic which will be coming in from that area to us.
Okay, 2 more questions. One of them was if we're starting school early, and the second thing is the second question was commuting via public transportation, and the third one is shul and COVID. Okay, let's start first with.
Well, Mara Pearl, let me just catch you up. So in terms of starting school early, I had mentioned that we had not thought of that, but that it's something that we can think about as we get closer to it. In terms of the shul, I had mentioned that as long as the policy is that no adults other than staff are allowed into the building, that will include weekday minyan will also not take place while that policy is in effect. Once that policy changes, then of course, then that would allow for weekday minyan also.
Okay, next question. Staff commuting via public transportation. Actually, that was a question amongst the directors network that I share with the other Jewish day schools around the city. I don't know yet what that's going to entail. However, and I actually spoke to, was Beit Rabban and Heschel regarding that. They were thinking about it for their own staff. And again, if that's something we want to do, or I don't know if we will be required to do that, but if it's something we want to do, it is extremely doable. Our teachers live in 3 specific locations, and a few of them have cars, and we can commute via car. When other schools have been closed because the trains were down, our teachers were in school. If it was snow, if it was a hurricane, or whatever it was, we were able to get to school via cars. So that is something that we're thinking about, and is on the table for a possibility of, yes, having the teachers stay away from public transportation. Will there be a written policy for tuition reimbursements and all that? Absolutely. We're thinking through all these policies, and it's going to be clear before school begins. What if your child has school and has to be pulled out? What if there's a teacher and your class has to be closed? All these questions regarding what's going to happen if we close. We're going to try to think of every scenario and have it written up so that it's clear, and people, it's not that we're going to have a surprise every time something might happen. The largest class size would be 10. What would the smallest class size be? Good question. I don't know. Class of 8 to 10 is a good size. When a class is really small, sometimes the dynamics doesn't work out so well. So I don't know. But I would say I would definitely open up a class for 6. That would work. And if we have to make a class size up to 10, I would do that. Somebody just asked the question, are we planning to open up an 18-month class this year? No, we're starting with 2s. And again, if there's any question regarding, if there might be a spike in the fall, that the first class we're closing is the 2s class. Because if they spend a week or 2 acclimating to school and then have to be out of school for another week, 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to be so hard to reacclimate them again. We have to be really careful with how we think through the 2s class. Somebody asked.
There's a question about a weekend shul goer contacting COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So we would, of course, inform the school community. However, given the current guidelines, since there would be a comprehensive deep cleaning every Sunday, that would not be an event which would require the closing of school.
Okay, another question was, what happens, our family's going to have full disclosure if they fly to another country. So, in the past, the only thing I could compare this to is we did ask parents who flew to other countries to let us know regarding one of our policies, which is our lice policy, because we wanted to make sure that if a child did come back with a case of lice, that we catch it right away and it doesn't, we don't infect the rest of the class. I would say that most of the families have been very respectful of that, and they have let us know when they left the country. I'm assuming, though, that is something that the Department of Health is going to tell us, that we have to be aware when a child leaves the country, and it depends where they go to and what the policy is going to be once they return. I'm sure we're going to get guidance regarding that as well. And again, we have an incredible parent body, and most parents have been extremely respectful of sharing information with us that affects the other children in the class. So I do look forward to 100% cooperation on that end. Let's see if there's any other questions. I think on my end that the list looks like it was completed. Again, does anybody want to share a question right now in an open forum? Please feel free to unmute yourself and share. Okay, one last thing I want to wrap up with is we will keep you informed. After this Zoom tonight, I will send out, not I, of course, my right hand, Shnerny, will send out the email to everyone. And thank you, Shnerny, for all your hard work and for putting this together. So that everybody knows what we discussed tonight. This session was recorded also, and we'll be sending it out tomorrow as well. As I receive any news or information, I will be sending you flash bulletins. You know, this is what the Department of Health told us now. This is what the Department of Health told us today. So you will know, and as soon as I know it, you will know it. And we will be writing everything up again so you can look at it and study it. I know that this affects each one of you in different ways, regarding, and specifically, you know, regarding the age of your child or the tuition and the hardship that it's causing. I know for some of the children here, being on Zoom was extremely difficult and parents were very frustrated. For some parents, being on Zoom was great and they wish they had more of it. But I know by speaking to so many of you over the past few months, how challenging this was in every way. And just to end off, I am really committed. We are all very committed to do everything we can to keep Chabad open as many days as possible, no matter what it takes from our staff or what creative ways we need to come up with to have school open as many days as possible. If it means taking away vacation days for, you know, and cutting short, you know, our calendar, and even if it makes the year look very different, we will do everything we can to accommodate the children and the families in our school. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. And of course, feel free to ask me any questions, send me an email, WhatsApp me, whatever it is. Good night.